Hello, everybody, and welcome into this live version of the Scarlet Shoot Around reaction. Fellas and gals, I tell you what, it has never been more obvious in our podcast career that this is a red state as Nebraska dominates. And I want to emphasize, underline, bold, dominates Creighton 71-50 behind 44% shooting from the field, 37% shooting from three, but more importantly, and I want to emphasize this, more importantly, holding Creighton to 31% from the field, 24% from three, and 59% from the free throw line. This was an effort game. It is very simple as that. Which team wanted this more? And there were a lot of questions following Nebraska's lackluster performance, most especially against USC Upstate, of whether this team was going to decide to be a team that wanted to make the tournament or a team that is just going to kind of ride the wave and hopefully they sneak in at the end of the day. And there's a lot to be written yet. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We pride ourselves at the Scarlet Shoot Around podcast as being as level-headed as we possibly can be, not too high, not too low. But when we beat Creighton by 21, there's something to be celebrated. Let's just be honest with what this really is. Nebraska wins the first half by 14, as this was 33-19. They win the second half by 7, 38-31. And really, Nebraska dominated in just about all facets. I mean, when you look at the box score, Nebraska, they did lose the turnover battle 12-8, which is fascinating considering Nebraska won by 21, but they out-rebounded Creighton by 4, out-rebounded them by 5 on the defensive end. Creighton did have much more bench points, but I honestly give a lot of credit to Creighton in that regard. But Nebraska's bench, especially when Mast and Stanford are not on the floor, which was an extended period of the game as both of them kind of sat early in that first half. But it didn't matter, again, as Nebraska led by 14 at halftime. Creighton's bench played very well. You have to give credit where credit is due. But Nebraska, as we talked about in our preview episode, dominated the Jays underneath as they led in points in the paint 24-12. And again, the Nebraska defense, this was the key to the game. Nebraska led in steals 7-2. And Fred Hoiberg had talked a lot about deflections, especially the USC Upstate game. We quoted it on the podcast for those that listened. And Fred Hoiberg said, Nebraska had one deflection, or don't quote me on this, but Nebraska said, or Fred Hoiberg said they had one deflection in 18 minutes of game time. That's pathetic. Quote unquote, that's pathetic. And fellas, do you think that resonated with this basketball team or what? As the Huskers had 7 steals in this game and just gave them everything they could get. They gave them everything, the Creighton Blue Jays, that they could handle as Nebraska led wire to wire. 37 minutes of lead time, Creighton lead time 0:00. They left no doubt in this game. And I would say this before we get too much into the individual statistics of it, which I'm very excited to talk about, as a lot of guys had very, very good games. This is a narrative changing game. We talked about it with our lead tweet into the game. Nebraska has now won 3 of 4 in this series, 2 of them at Creighton. Nebraska dominates Creighton at home, almost avenging the 2023 loss at home, winning by 21 wire to wire. And again, you try to stay leveled. Again, I emphasize we here at the Scarlet Shoot Around try to stay leveled as best we can. But you have to ask yourself after this game, Creighton spends twice, and we have that on good sources, twice the amount on their roster than Nebraska does. They come into Lincoln and get dominated. Again, I stress wire to wire. Frankly, it was never even close. Past the 16-minute timeout in the first half, it was never close. And Fred Hoiberg has figured out the formula at Nebraska. And on the other side, Greg Hoiberg, or not Greg Hoiberg, goodness gracious. I'm drawing a blank on his name. My goodness gracious. Greg McDermott, not Greg Hoiberg, my God. Greg McDermott has named his replacement in waiting in Alan Huss. And this is not negatively speaking on Greg McDermott, not negatively speaking on Alan Huss or any of that. This is giving credit to what Fred Hoiberg has done over his past 3 years in Nebraska. And let's be honest, guys, we have not talked enough about Fred Hoiberg's unbelievable resurgence with this basketball program. 3 years ago, Nebraska had the worst stretch of success or lack of success in this term in program history. Nebraska had not won anything of any significance in Fred Hoiberg's first 3 years. It would have been fully justified, and I want to make this abundantly clear. It would have been fully and 100% justified in firing Fred Hoiberg after year 3, based on the results that we got. But with Nebraska basketball, you have to give credit where credit is due. And the administration at the time gave him one more year. I believe it was Trev Alberts, and he didn't do a lot right here. I know he's often hated around these parts, and understandably so. But Trev Alberts gave Fred Hoiberg a life raft and said, "We're going to cut your pay." And Fred Hoiberg's defense, Fred Hoiberg approached it and said, "Okay, I understand. I'll take a pay cut, and we're going to try to make this work." So Fred Hoiberg deserves so, so, so so much credit in what we got to experience tonight. Because again, for multiple factors, he figured out the formula to the Big Ten and built a roster that can make this thing work. And I may be speaking ahead of turn a little bit. We haven't started Big Ten play yet. Wisconsin comes here on Wednesday. There's a lot to be determined on that front yet. But so far, Nebraska is 9-0. I can Scarlet shoot around guarantee Nebraska basketball will be ranked when the next AP poll comes out here very shortly for the first time since 2019, first time in the Fred Hoiberg tenure. And we sit here at a turning point in which Creighton will most likely, we don't know, but most likely be changing of the guard after this year with Greg McDermott's impending retirement, whether that's this year, next year, still to be determined. But when you name a head coach in waiting, it's obvious that it's impending. It will happen eventually, sooner rather than later. And Nebraska basketball, after the Fred Hoiberg disaster that was the first 3 years, what do? They go and win back-to-back games over ranked Creighton both times. Once number 7, top 10 team in the country. And the other time, I don't actually know what they were. Maybe 14, 15, something like that. Somebody can fact check me. But all Nebraska has done is completely change the identity of this program. And more in more ways than one. In more ways than one, right? Because you look at the Derek Walker team, you look at the Sam Griesel team, you look at even a lot of what they did in 2024 when they made the tournament. And it was always a defense first team. Always a defense first team. You look at what Fred finally started to get going in that year where they didn't make the postseason. They were hoping to make the NIT on a late push when they beat Maryland, beat Penn State, and we really saw the Tominaga coming out party. And they found something defensively, and as well with what Fred has always wanted in that point big system, and it started to develop from there. And while they didn't have a postseason, any fan that has watched this team for any serious length of time could see that there was progress. And again, you go back specifically to beating Maryland. You go back specifically to some of those late season wins in that 2023 season. And you say, what an unbelievable turning point. And you look back on it now more than ever, especially with what Fred Hoiberg has accomplished as of late. And you say, my goodness, how important those wins were to end that season, to show hope, not just to the fan base, not just to the fan base, but to the administration, to give him that life raft season of 2023-24 in which Nebraska made the tournament. And it's on good sources that, Fred Hoiberg, whether he responded or not, he was being courted by big programs around the country testing his interest. Nebraska did great to lock him up for long term. But who would have ever seen this coming? Who would have ever seen? If you had told me after Nebraska was in the middle of year 3 of Fred Hoiberg, and we're sitting here 3 years later, Nebraska demolishes Creighton. And this is in the middle of their dynasty run, right? Nebraska demolishes Creighton 71-50 on their home floor after winning back-to-back games on the road. 3 of the last 4, Nebraska has won. It's almost unbelievable. Not even the biggest optimist could believe where this program has developed to where we're at now. And all you can say is, wow. And I wish I had more words than that, but all you can say is wow for what Fred Hoiberg, and again, you emphasize what he's been able to do with a lackluster budget. Robin Washut has reported that this team is in the bottom 3 of overall payroll in the Big Ten. Bottom three. And here we sit in 2 days, and Nebraska basketball is going to be a ranked team with what sources say, this is not Robin specific, but what sources say is about a $4 million roster. And you look around the league, guys, Kentucky, a 20 plus $1 million roster. Creighton has doubled up what Nebraska has as a roster financially with the additions of Owen Freeman, Josh Dix, Blake Harper, etc. What Fred Hoiberg has been able to do is nothing short of unbelievable. Is absolutely nothing short of unbelievable, and we owe this live to what he's been able to accomplish when his back was against the wall. Again, nothing short of a miracle. Unbelievable. But that was a long, discussion of what Fred Hoiberg has accomplished individually in this game. Rick Mast goes for 20 points, 3 of 5 from deep, 5 rebounds, 2 assists on 31 minutes. Price Sanford, 13 points, 5 of 7 from the field, 2 of 4 from deep. He goes a perfect showing from inside the arc. Sam Hoiberg, 6 of 10 with a 15-point showing. I want to say that's a career high. I don't know that, but it sure feels like it would be. I think he maybe has eclipsed that once. Burke Buchtengel. Burke Buchtengel. We have to take a second to appreciate what he was able to do in this game. And again, the people that don't watch the games and watch as a casual fan, which frankly, again, disclaimer, all of you casual watchers are welcome. This program needs any and everybody to support this program that it can possibly get. This is not meant to be negatively reflective of anybody that casually watches this team. But Burke Buchtengel goes for 6 points on 1 of 6 from the field, 4 of 8 from the free throw line. You look at that and you say, this guy has struggled. He's had issues, etc. Hasn't made a 3-pointer since the Pentagon. That's a fact. But 13 rebounds. 13 rebounds. Guys, rebounds are an effort stat. Rebounds are an effort stat. And against a team in Creighton that has had quite a bit of success on the offensive boards, Burke Buchtengel was the linchpin in making sure that Creighton did not have an abundant amount of second chance points. Because as we talked about in our preview, that was going to be the way that Creighton stayed in this game with second chance points. We know they're not a great shooting team, and they evidenced it tonight by shooting 24% from deep. We knew Creighton wasn't going to beat us by shooting threes. But what we did know is that Nebraska was going to shoot a ton of threes. They limited it today in some respects. They only shot 27 threes on 55 attempts, right? That is still about a 50% clip. But what we're so happy about from the podcast perspective is that Nebraska didn't fall in love with the three. We said it time and time again. This Creighton defense inside is lackluster. Some would say soft. Some would say soft. We're not going to say that. But this Creighton defense is lackluster inside, and Nebraska took advantage of that. And they picked their spots very, very, very well. Very well. So I'm going to continue recapping this game, but I highly encourage anybody that's in this live to request to speak. For those that have not taken part in these before, we've had obviously a big surge since our last one. If you submit a request to speak, we'll get to you guys in as close of time order as we possibly can. We'll have you on the show, and this will be posted on all of our podcast feeds and so on and so forth after the fact. So if you would like to share your thoughts, please go into the Twitter Spaces request to speak, and we'll get to you in chronological order. We want to hear from all of you. This is a celebration. So if you have anything to say, as long as it's, appropriate, because this needs to be posted on our feeds, please request to speak. This is a celebration and we all want to partake in it. So, again, rounding it out, Nebraska shoots 44% from the field, 37% from three. Fantastic effort. Again, offense was great, but defense was even better. Creighton only shoots 31% from the field, 24% from three, and the effort was there all night. What can you say? It was very impressive effort from Nebraska. And what an effort. I mean, this is not even the biggest optimist. Not even the biggest optimist could have seen this coming. So, with that said, 4 Nation looks like they requested to speak, so we will add you in as a speaker. K402, you are live. Just make sure to unmute your mic, share your thoughts, and what'd you think of the Creighton demolition here tonight?
Yeah, I just have 2 insult stats to bring to this. The first is when we play Creighton next year, it will now have been 3 years total since Creighton has led in a game against us, as it was wire to wire last year too. And we've also held Creighton's starting bigs the last 2 seasons to a total 0 for 2 shooting with 2 total points.
Yeah, what can you say? I mean, like, again, you talk about not just the narrative of this game, but you talk about the narrative of the series, right? Nebraska has won 3 of 4 back-to-back games at Creighton, both of those ranked. And Creighton has not led in this game for 2 years. Again, I've kind of been staring at screens, so I haven't seen the live stats and everything that people are tweeting right now. But what can you, I mean, like, it's never been more in doubt than what it is now. I mean, or never been less in doubt, I should say, than what we've seen right now. Nebraska has not trailed in this series for 80 minutes. Think about that. Compartmentalize that. Take that in. Nebraska has not trailed in this series against Creighton, either home or away, in 80 minutes. Total demolition today, total demolition last week. And they really made a statement. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say that Creighton is on a downward trajectory. We're not going to say that. You know, we try to be as respectful as we possibly can. But Nebraska, I think the line has never been more clear than what it is now. Nebraska is on a hard, hard positive trajectory. And again, I go back to what Fred Hoiberg has been able to do in identifying talent with his hands tied behind his back regarding, the financials of it all. It's absolutely unbelievable what we've been able to do this thus far in the season. I was talking to friends after the game, and we were talking about how Nebraska would be happy preseason. I mean, ecstatic preseason to go 3-1 in the Big Four games. Those Big Four games being Oklahoma at the Pentagon, the 2 games in Kansas City, and this game. Nebraska would have been ecstatic to go 3-1 in those games. They would have taken 2-2 in a lot of ways. But here we sit on December 7th, and Nebraska is 4-0 in those games. And the resume is built. They're about to be ranked. What Nebraska has done. And again, I encourage anybody that wants to share their thoughts to request as a speaker in the live. I want to hear from everybody. This is a celebration. What I want to emphasize is that Nebraska has set themselves up to even have a semi, what we would call at this point, failure in the Big Ten season. In that they can probably now, assuming they win the bye games, with North Dakota, New Hampshire here coming up. What we can assume at this point is if they take care of business where they need to, Nebraska should, italicized, be able to go 9-11 in the Big Ten and still make the tournament. And had you posed that to anybody, I mean anybody that's a Nebraska basketball fan, at this point, you would have said, I would take it in a heartbeat. Not that obviously there would be any pushback. That's kind of stating the obvious to some extent. But nobody could have predicted this. Nobody could have predicted a 21-point demolition of Creighton. Nobody could have predicted a 2-0 win in Kansas City, a 2-0 tournament win. Nobody could have combined that with a win down in the Pentagon. Nobody could have predicted that. I mean, this has been nothing short of ethereal. I mean, absolutely dreamlike of a start for Nebraska. Now, here's the deal. And again, this is the part of staying level-headed, right? Is that Nebraska has a very talented Wisconsin team coming in here. Very talented Wisconsin team coming in on Wednesday. A short turnaround. Nebraska gained a bit of a benefit in having, 6 days of prep for this Creighton game. That helped big time, especially with the run that they had been on in a lot of games in a short amount of time. Wisconsin just demolished Northwestern before coming down here, and they're going to be on longer rest than Nebraska has. Now, they have to travel here, so that obviously plays a role in all of this. But Nebraska has a huge, huge Wisconsin opportunity coming in because you look at the slate, and we here at the podcast like to divide everything into pods per se, right? So you look at Nebraska's schedule, and in the next 2 games, you'd hope to go 2-0. Or I'm sorry, well, you'd hope to go 2-0, but realistically, you'd expect to go 1-1. If you go 0-2, you're kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit, right? With Wisconsin coming here and heading out to Champaign, Illinois to play Illinois. As we sit here analytically, let me pull up Ken Palm. I don't have it right in front of me. But before the game, what I do know is Nebraska would have been projected to be about a 10-point underdog heading into Champaign. Now, has this adjusted? Absolutely, because Nebraska jumped, I believe it was 6 spots. Six entire spots in Ken Palm after the demolition of Creighton. And I like to use that word demolition because, I was talking to my younger brother and beating Creighton by 20 plus points, ladies and gentlemen, that doesn't happen with this program. That does not happen. These are moments that, as a Nebraska ball fan, and this is what I tweeted. These are moments that you need to soak in as a Nebraska basketball fan. I mean, this just simply doesn't happen. As we sit here analytically, Wisconsin, Nebraska projected to be a 1-point favorite, so this will probably be a pick 'em. And as we head to Illinois, we'll be a 10-point underdog. As it sits today, things are subject to change as always. But it was so big to win this game because had you lost to Creighton, you really, I mean, that pushes all of your chips onto this Wisconsin game in the short term. In the short term. But now Nebraska can afford to go 1-1 without losing any kind of headway in WAB, which we frequently refer to on the podcast. Wins above bubble, for those that are not familiar, kind of basically, essentially at its core, gauges where you're at against the bubble. A positive number, implies you're doing well. Negative number implies you're behind. Nebraska now, as I head over to Bart Torvik, bear with me for a second. Nebraska in wins above bubble. By the way, they jumped to 35th in Bart Torvik, which is a 7-point jump in Bart. They now sit at plus 1.7 wins above bubble. That is, I would sure guess, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but top 20 in the country. I feel strongly about that without even looking at it. So Nebraska has done everything they could possibly do to this point, obviously, by winning every game they've played. Couple quality wins, no Q1s yet, but a good set of Q2 wins, no bad losses. They've done everything they can do. So, what can you say? Again, Nebraska, the best adjusted defensive performance so far as they performed at 74 against Creighton, according to Bart Torvik. If Nebraska can bottle up what they did defensively today against Creighton, they can force their way into a 6 seed. And I know that might be some hopium at this point, but nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. But now we've seen Nebraska can do it, and we've seen what their potential is. Again, best defensive performance of the season thus far. Looks like their fourth best offensive performance of the season so far. Again, I've talked about it at length, but it's nothing short of spectacular what they've been able to accomplish thus far in the season. Let's go to Evan Weekland, longtime listener to the show. Matter of fact, I believe, Evan, you were a top, like, first 15 follower of the show, potentially. Always glad to have you on, Evan. What do you think of the dismantling of Creighton today?
Well, first of all, I just want to get the stat right. It was a single digit. It's top 10, Blake. Let's get it right.
top 10. Thank you again. I'm not looking at the live Twitter feed, so thank you for correcting me.
You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. No, so I was just going to point out. So I like to pay attention to, the nuance of the game, where you kind of see the in between stuff. And I mean, I just want to kind of reiterate what you were saying about Bear K to the casual fan. Like, trust me, every time a three goes up from him, I bite my tongue and I absolutely hate it. But the little things that he does are incredible. There was a moment in the game when Jamarcus got either his third or fourth foul called on him, and he was mad at the ref. And Bear K like comes over to him, and he's the one to be like, "Hey, we're good. Like, let's chill out a little bit." So like, I feel like you notice that a lot from him, where he's always got the positive energy, and he'll be the one to like call everyone into those little huddles and things like that. And I think that stuff goes very unnoticed for a lot of people, especially if you didn't play basketball or maybe you just don't watch a lot. Um, so I just think that he is huge for that. So I'll live with a couple ugly shots here and there. But with that, I'll hear what you got to say. Thanks, man. Good to have you on. See ya.
Always very much appreciate Evan. Again, I always have to shout him out. He was one of the first like 15 to 20 followers of the show 2 years ago. And, I don't know if you want to say saw the potential of what we do or whatever, but someone that saw what we were doing early and has been with us since the absolute start. So from the bottom of our heart, Evan, thank you so much for your support of the show. And I cannot tell you that how much that means to us. Seriously, bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. And he highlighted a great thing. Burke, again, we talked about it earlier, but Burke, a lot of people like to go after him. Again, I emphasize it's the casual fan that's box score watching. That's not watching the game, right? Look at a guy like Burke and say, "Oh my God, this guy can't shoot. Oh my God." But what he does for the people that pay attention and the people that look at the deeper analytics than what's the box score will show, Burke is one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable defensive piece that this team has. I can guarantee all of you that Creighton is not held to a season low 50 points without Burke Buchengel playing the role that he did today. And while he's not been a great shooter, you know what? Let me add this. While Burke has not been a great shooter, I loved, maybe Fred Hoiberg listened to the podcast because I loved what our plan was for Burke on the offensive end. We're going to give him one or two shots a half. I don't, remember the sequencing exactly in my head, but I know he took the first shot of the game, which say what you will about it. It was wide open. I mean, it is what it is. He took the first shot of the game, didn't hit it, and he went to the second half and he took another 3-point shot. But outside of that, I mean, you look at Burke's line, again, he didn't shoot it great, right? He did not shoot it great. That's kind of become the trend at this point. He's 0 of 2 from 3, but he only took 2 3-pointers. And there were multiple times throughout the course of that game where he actually had an open look. And frankly, Creighton was daring him to shoot. They were sagging off him, begging him to shoot the basketball, and he wouldn't do it. So it was very obvious if you look between the lines that Burke was essentially told, or at least understood on his end one way or the other. Look, you're going to get a shot a half. If you hit it, you're going to get a longer leash. And if you don't, you need to find somebody that is going to hit a shot from outside, or you're going to play to your strength inside. And again, Burke did a fantastic job inside. 1 of 6 from the field does not do justice for the impact that he had on this game. If you look at the plus minus, Burke plus minus of 17 tonight. How about Jamarcus Lawrence, by the way, while we're talking about it? Plus minus of plus 29. Rank Mass with positive plus minus of plus 29. What Burke brings to this team, and it's never been more clear than what we saw tonight. He's going to provide defense. He's going to provide a calming factor. And to exactly what Evan said, he's going to provide a leadership aspect to which he's been with this team. He's now, by the way, Burke has beaten Creighton twice, which has to mean something in fan base circles around here, right? He is such a critical factor in what we do, that it cannot be overstated. And again, in a lot of ways, this was the Burke Buchengel game. This was the Burke Buchengel game, and you cannot give him enough credit for what he was able to accomplish tonight. Big Red Takes. I'm going to add you as a speaker. You were requested for quite a bit, so I apologize for the delay. Make sure to unmute your mic. You've been given speaking access. What did you think of the Creighton demolition here today? 71-50 final score. What were your thoughts? It's showing unmute and then it flips. I don't know what's going on there, but try to unmute here. And if it can, it looks like it glitched out. Well, while you try to, we'll get back to you, Big Red Takes. In the meantime, let's add Keisei Tominaga fan club as a speaker. Go. What do you think of tonight's demolition of Creighton? Keisei Tominaga fan.
What's up? Thank you for the pod, everything as well. I thought it was great. Defense came out, rotations were clean. Sam made it really hard on Dix all night long. And I think this settles the debate that Sam is 10 times more the basketball player than Fedor Zujic. Go Sam. Fedor sucks. Rink in my mast.
It's been really interesting to follow from the sidelines of this whole conversation, in the sense that I think it's Sam Hoiberg fan is the account that's kind of running this massive narrative about how Sam Hoiberg's better than Fedor. But you have to say, you have no choice but to say, after this performance, Sam Hoiberg, 15 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal, plus minus of plus 17, as you compare to Fedor. 5 points, 2 of 6 from the field, 1 rebound, no assists, 2 fouls, plus minus of minus 21. So for anybody that ever had any doubt in that narrative, Sam Hoiberg is ever so clearly, and it's done. That narrative is done. Sam Hoiberg fan, you can take it to the bank. There is simply no response to it anymore. That Sam Hoiberg is a better player than Fedor Zujic. That is well done and decided at this point. Big Red Takes. I'm going to try to add you again as a speaker here. Try to unmute your mic and let's see if we can get her working.
Yep, there we go. We got it.
How are we doing tonight? What'd you think of the game?
Good, man. Hey, first of all, appreciate the podcast and all you guys do. Obviously, great game. Like you've said it, you've striked that guitar many times. Wasn't expected. Pretty awesome outcome. I just kind of wanted to talk about these upcoming 6 Big Ten games. I know as of last week, they were mentioning that strength of schedule wise, things could have changed, but that was going to be like the second hardest start to the conference of any team in the conference. So just kind of gauging, we're talking about what we want to do for this upcoming week. Obviously 1-1, I think, is the goal. What do we want to do with these first 6? 3 away, 3 home. Obviously Wisconsin, Illinois. I think we got Indiana, who obviously had that rough week. And then I think Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan State.
Yeah, I think this is here's the key to this, by the way, and anybody that has a knowledgeable base, understanding of what this program is the goal first and foremost, everybody, is to get in the tournament, right? That's straightforward. Everybody knows what the goal is, to win a tournament game. And you win a tournament game by getting in the tournament. Whether it's a 6 seed, whether it's an 11 seed, at this point it frankly doesn't matter. We just want to get in the tournament. Getting in the tournament is celebrated as a Super Bowl, right? Like that. Let's just call it what it is, and that's where this program is at. That's not to say that's where it'll be forever, but that's where it is right now. And so, okay, so let's look at this. You look at the next 6 Big Ten games. You are at home against Wisconsin. You head to Illinois. Then you play your 2 bye games, which, according to Bart Torvik, you'll be 30-point favorites or more in both of those. So just assume those are wins at this point. You then you host Michigan State, you head to Ohio State, you head to Indiana, and you host Oregon. Out of those 4 games, Nebraska, again, according to Bart Torvik, just analytically, we will be underdogs in 3 of those 4 games. So I think, again, the best way to manage a 20-game Big Ten schedule is to look at it in the perspective of dividing it into little segments. So again, as I talked about earlier, you look at Wisconsin and Illinois. Nebraska needs to try to go 1-1 in those games. Now, Kent Palm projects that to Nebraska -1. Bart Torvik projects the Wisconsin game to Nebraska -3. So realistically, again, as we always do on the podcast, you'd expect that spread to be about -2. So Nebraska will be a very ever so slight favorite against Wisconsin if everything else holds coming into Wednesday. That spread will be live usually Tuesday mid-afternoon. So, Nebraska expected to win that game. Now, opposite, on the other side of it, Nebraska will be about a 10-point underdog as they head into Champaign. So if you're looking to gain ground, if you had to pick one of those 2 games to win, you would take the road win at Illinois because that'd be worth 0.85 WOB, the Wisconsin home game worth 0.45. But the inter narrative between those 2 games is if you lose to Wisconsin at home, then playing Illinois and winning that game also almost becomes a must win, right? So, you'll take one out of 2 in those 2 games. That's as simple as it looks. And I know the people that just box score watch and look at the ESPN app and all those kind of things, they're going to say that Nebraska, assuming the worst, Nebraska loses by, 18-20 at Illinois. They're going to say, this team sucks, so on and so forth, blah, 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 right? But you have to just lock those people out, understanding they just don't get it. They're not bad people. We have to accept those people into the fan base. But you have to just take it for what it's worth, and they just don't quite understand what the grand scheme of all of this is. Between Wisconsin and Illinois, you need to go 1-1. So then you play your bye games, and you look at Michigan State, Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. You have home games against Michigan State and Oregon, road games against Ohio State, Indiana. Indiana, to what Big Red Takes had just mentioned, right? They've fell off a little bit. They lost on the road to Minnesota, and I believe they lost at home to somebody. I don't remember that off the top of my head. They lost. They lost on a neutral court to Louisville. They host Penn State here on Tuesday. So they'll most likely end up 1-1 in the conference. But Nebraska right now projected to a 6-point underdog per Bart Torvik in that game. So between those 4 games, again, you divide this into pods, which I think is the most manageable way to approach it. You'd like to go 2-2. It's such a hard stretch, and it gets a lot easier as we get kind of into January and February. But Michigan State at home, Nebraska projected to be a 2-point underdog. Ohio State and Indiana on the road. Ohio State both roughly a 6-point underdog. Oregon at home about a 9-point favorite. So if Nebraska can find a way to either beat Michigan State at home behind the electric home crowd, and we hope that the crowd tonight will mirror what we'll have against Michigan State on January 2nd. But if Nebraska can hold serve at home between Michigan State and Oregon, they can afford to lose both other games against Ohio State and Indiana on the road. Again, they're projected to be about 6-point underdogs. But if you can go 2-2 in that stretch, you have to consider that a success. And I really don't want to be here after the Oregon game saying, or going into the Oregon game, even rather, after Nebraska maybe loses 3 straight of those games and saying, try to hold serve. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Because what Nebraska has done, guys, in this non-conference slate is build some of that leeway. And that if you sit here right now, assuming Nebraska wins one of two between Wisconsin and Illinois, and goes 1-3 against Michigan State, Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon, Nebraska is still going to be looking good for the tournament. They're not behind the eight ball. They'll be projected about maybe a 10 seed or 9 seed at that point. And your back's against the wall to an extent, but you still have the better part of 15 data points left on the schedule. So the schedule does soften up, especially late. Nebraska expected to be favorites in 3 of their last 5 games. So a lot to be determined, but very hard slate coming up. So I hope that any casual fan that's listening to this, if Nebraska goes on a bit of a cold streak here in early January, understand that it's okay. It's okay. The Big Ten is loaded. There's going to be a ton of Q1 opportunities, and the resume chances of getting Q1 wins are still abound. Harbinger of Corn, adding you as a speaker again. As you load in, you'll be muted. Just make sure to unmute your mic. What did you think about the demolition, as I like to state, the demolition of Creighton here tonight, 71-50? What are your thoughts?
There's a couple things I really liked seeing, especially considering the narratives going into the game about Nebraska's 3-point defense. I thought that the way that they rotated to shooters and closed out hard without fouling or flying by was really impressive. And I think that will really serve them well going forward, especially in the Big Ten. And the other thing that I was really impressed with was Berkey's rebounding, and especially since he only took 1 3 in the game. It seems like he really stepped into his role as a defender and rebounder. So I'm wondering what you guys think. Is it a crazy take to say that Berkey could be the key to helping this team even have a winning record in Big Ten play if he rebounds like that, especially against bigger teams like Purdue, where they just throw 7-footers at you? A guy that can get boards and rebounds and play clean defense like that is just going to be a huge benefit. And love the podcast. And if everybody's fading Mike, we might have the most wonderful season ever.
Gotta love the Mike Slater. Mike drops to 2-7 on the season, as it's been a really, really rough start for my co-host, who was unable to join today, which is a shame. But he's got a very busy life and all that kind of stuff. So, but I know he'll tune back in here by the end of it. But yeah, Mike off to a brutally rough start. Going back to what you talked about with Berkey, we kind of talked about him not at huge length, but the key to Berkey, and really the key to this game specifically is what he was able to provide on the defensive and rebounding side. People like to look at box scores and look at points, right? That's the first, Berkey only had 6 points. What a rough game, or whatever. But it goes so much deeper than that in what he provides. Again, if you look deeper in the analytics at defensive box score per minute, Berkey proves to be one of the top 1 or 2 defenders on this team, and that makes such a key difference. Now, the one thing I will say is we don't entirely know what we have in the depth on the front court. If knock on wood, Berkey would ever get injured, we don't really know what we have with Leo Curtis. We haven't seen a huge extended run from Jared Garcia yet. We know he kind of has some turnover problems. Didn't have a great night tonight, but played some okay minutes. As I pull up the box score here, 1 second. Jared Garcia played 5 minutes, a plus minus a -4, had a block, went 0 for 2 from the field. So, in only 5 minutes, it's hard to make a huge impact on the floor. So, we don't know what he can bring necessarily to this team in an extended role. What we do know is he was a key cog in what Tulsa did last year. They didn't have a great season by any means, but it's a quality depth piece that probably isn't, a normal starter at the high major level, but on the backside of things, it's not a guy that you look at and you look at, Fred Hoiberg teams have passed. He's far better off the top of my head than some of the depth pieces that we've had. You look at a guy like, Blaze Cada had moments where he actually played pretty good on defense, very similar in a lot of ways to Burke actually. But you look at some of the defensive bigs that Fred has had in the past, and Jared Garcia, just based on resume alone, would trump anything that they have done. That's not to say that that he's better, but he has the resume to say that I think this guy can contribute more if a larger role were to open. So, but again, Burke brings so much to this team: 13 rebounds, 10 defensive, 3 offensive. Added a block in both the steal, again plus minus a 17 says all you need to know. While he only had 6 points and at 4 of 8 from the free throw line, you like to see a little bit better, but he does things that are never ever going to show up on the box score. And you raised a great point, by the way, that Nebraska does such a fantastic job, especially tonight, on closing out on the court side of these corner threes. How many times tonight, guys, did we see Creighton have an open three on the corner to where Nebraska closed out to the court side and they were forced into about a 15-foot jumper from the baseline? That is the epitome of a Nate Lenzer defense. If you can reverse the ball out top to the opposite side, you're probably going to have success. But if Nebraska is able to close out the way they did, like we saw tonight, and forced Creighton especially, and other Big Ten teams, Creighton maybe having a pretty down year, putting it nicely to this point. But a more talented team like Wisconsin comes in here. If you can force them into those baseline 16 footers, Nebraska is going to have a lot of success. That is what this defense tries to force you into on that baseline trap. So, Burke is kind of a huge key to that in helping defend the post. We don't know what Leo Curtis is going to bring. So there's a lot of question marks on that front. We don't really know what Jared Garcia will bring in an extended role, but fantastic game from Burke. Again, we said earlier, this is the Burke Buchton Gel game. Don't be fooled, folks. Mass had a great offensive game, 20 points, 50% from the field. Sam Hoiberg, 15 points, 6 of 10 from the field. You think this game meant something to Sam Hoiberg? There you go. And just a fantastic performance. So if anybody else would like to share their thoughts, please request to speak. Otherwise, we're going to try to start rounding this out. Nebraska, beats Creighton against 71-50, third win in 4 years here against the Jays. Just an unbelievable defensive performance. That was the story of the game. As again, Nebraska brought the effort from the tip. You really saw it on the defensive effort, especially opening the game on, I believe it was 15-2 at one point. They hold Creighton to 24% shooting from the field. 59% from the free throw line, but which I think the Husker student section especially had a huge role in. Creighton only used 24% from beyond the arc. Creighton has 35 rebounds to Nebraska's 39, so Nebraska +4 there. Nebraska +5 in defensive rebounds. They're -1 in offensive rebounds. So Nebraska did take a bit of an advantage in the defensive rebounding effort of Creighton, which we kind of highlighted in the preview that they're a bit lackluster in. Creighton's bench plays great at 29 bench points to the Huskers 9. But again, the key to the game, as we talked about in the preview, Nebraska dominates Creighton with points in the paint 24-12. And again, if Nebraska fell in love with the three, we might be looking at a different result. But there is no question at this point, ladies and gentlemen, Nebraska is a red state, as again, 3 of 4, a 21-point just total dismantling of the Creighton Blue Jays. And again, I'll end the live stream with this, guys. This is what being a Nebraska basketball fan is all about. Nebraska simply doesn't ever beat Creighton by 21 points, let alone oftentimes beat Creighton if you look at the past 15 years. Nebraska doesn't start seasons 9-0. Nebraska is not ranked going into the middle of December like they're about to be now. This is what it's all about. And there's plenty of season to be played out yet. And you never want to put the carriage in front of the horse. But you cannot ask as a Nebraska basketball fan to be in a better situation than to be 4-0 in the critical non-conference games this year. Again, looking at Oklahoma, who we played down in the Hall of Fame Classic in New Mexico and Kansas State and Creighton. Being 4-0 in those swing critical non-conference games and looking down the barrel of entering Big Ten play undefeated. You simply, it doesn't get any better than this. So I implore all of you, if you're of drinking age, and frankly, if you're not, find a way around it. This is one of those nights where you just have a cocktail and you celebrate, because we have approximately, it's 7:46 as I say this right now. We have about 4 hours left of celebrating this win, and we have to rotate quickly, just as the same way the team would rotate into Wisconsin, because while the rotations were sharp tonight, they're going to have to be even better against Wisconsin, because they're going to come in here expecting to win. This Wisconsin team is no joke. So, but for now, as we focus on tonight, what a big win for Nebraska. What a big narrative changing win for the program. Again, 3 of 4. Can't state it enough. Treat Creighton fans with respect, as much as, negative they may be. Don't go after them. They haven't experienced this before, so be soft on them. They don't know what losing to Nebraska 3 out of 4 times is like. But if you happen to have a spare Nebraska hoodie, maybe offer it to them and tell them the bandwagon's open if they want to join. So, with that, again, wrapping it up, Nebraska beats Creighton 71-50 tonight. I hope you all have a great night. Have a drink, enjoy tonight, and starting tomorrow morning, it's on to Wisconsin. So, thank you all for joining. This podcast will go live tonight for you to listen again in the morning if you would so like to. And we'll, hopefully, the plan right now is to get the Wisconsin preview posted on Tuesday morning. That's going to be tough. We'll see if we can make it work. These Big Ten quick turnarounds are brutal. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you guys get consistent content. So, quick shout outs. If you enjoy what we do, please check out scarletshootaround.com. Check our merch store if you'd like a t-shirt, hat, whatever. If you'd like to be entered in our free giveaway, please share your thoughts if you didn't already on the podcast here on this live version. Or please respond to our tweet that we have pinned to our profile asking what your thoughts were. We'll pick a sweatshirt winner. I also apologize for all the voice cracks, but we'll pick a sweatshirt winner at the end once we collect the tweets all there. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you support what we do, I thank every single one of you for tuning in tonight. I thank every single one of you for rooting for this program. I'll end it with this. I was in the student section when Nebraska gets dismantled under Tim Miles by I think it was like 91-50 or something. I was one of 20 students left in the stands, and to see this program make the turn it has over the past 7 years is nothing short of remarkable. As we sit here undefeated, expected to be ranked on Monday, all you can do is smile. This is what we've always hoped for, and this is what it's all about. So, thank you all. Have a drink tonight, and go Big Red. We'll see you soon.